my daughter was 6 years old. She started first grade. Every morning they had to stand in line and chant death to America, death to Israel. And I could not even tell her anything else because they were like little spies for the family and they were children. My name is Jaquiline Saper. I'm mostly known for the book I've written, my memoir about growing up in Iran. I lived through the Iranian Revolution and living in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The book is called From Miniskirt to Hijab, which basically shows the contrast of growing up in Imperial Iran, where I wore the latest fashion. It was a modern monarchy. And then hijab is the Islamic dress code, which I wore for 8 years.
So let's jump right into the story.
Okay, so I was born in Tehran, the capital city of Iran. I grew up there during the 60s and 70s, and it was known as the golden era of the Persian Jews. It was under the rule of the Pahlavi dynasty, and little that I knew, I grew up under the rule of the last king of Iran. Iran is also known as Persia. We all know it as the Persia in the Jewish Bible, in the story of Esther. It has had kings for 25 centuries until 1979, when the last king was ousted due to the Islamic Revolution, Iranian Revolution. So I was about 17, 18 years old when the revolution happened. I fully grew up in the imperial monarchy of Iran. And then I lived through the revolution, which was about 8-9 months. And this is the time when the majority of Persian Jews and other opponents of the Islamic Republic or pro-monarchists, everybody who could left, but I stayed behind. And I stayed and lived in the Islamic Republic of Iran for 8 more years until I left in 1987 with my husband, and then I had 2 young children.
So pre-revolution, before you left, what was the Jewish community like growing up as a Jew over there? What was Iran like for a young Jewish woman?
It was the time I grew up in northern Tehran. I attended a Jewish day school. It was known as Etefaq Day School. It had students from kindergarten to senior year in high school, over 2,000 students. Life was very good for me. The anti-Semitism my father had experienced in his youth or generations before him had no meaning for me. Iran was a cosmopolitan country, the city of Tehran. I had friends of all religions, nationalities. I was proud to be a Jew. And it was known as the golden era of Jews. Iran had good relations with Israel. There were direct flights between Tehran and Tel Aviv. Being Jewish didn't hinder me in any way.
So relations with your friends and everything was normal?
Was normal. We had neighbors with all different religions. There were Zoroastrians, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Baha'is. We all lived in harmony. Of course, I lived in the affluent part of the capital city. I don't know if the same experience was in smaller places, but the majority of Jews were in big cities. And they had opportunities to educate. My father was a university professor. I married in Iran. My husband was a doctor. He was a surgeon. All had this opportunity because of the Pahlavi dynasty, who treated all equals of different religious backgrounds and ethnicities as equals.
So in 1979, when the revolution happened, what did that mean for you and the other Jews of Iran?
Well, everything happened very fast. I was in senior year of high school, and my school was adjacent to University of Tehran, which was the epicenter of the revolution. What happened was in August of 1978, an incident happened in the south of the country, a city called Abadan. There was a movie theater called Rex Cinema, and people had flocked to the movie theater to watch a popular Persian movie, Iranian movie. And the doors were locked from the outside. The movie theater was set ablaze, and over 400 people were burned to death. And they blamed it on the Shah, the king. That was the beginning of the revolution. And there was a nemesis of the king. I call him the Shah in Persian, and his name was Ayatollah Khomeini. He was a cleric who had been exiled from Iran 14, 15 years prior. And Ayatollah Khomeini was a 76-year-old cleric at the time, and through his sermons recorded on cassette tapes, they were illegally smuggled into Iran. There were leaflets. That demonstrations suddenly got momentum, and he steered a revolution from a small village called Neufel-le-Château outside Paris. And the revolution, as I said, it spread so fast. The whole country came to a standstill. Almost everything went on strike. My last year of high school, which was supposed to be the most difficult year, became a joke because I went to school a few weeks at the beginning of the year, and then the schools were shut down. The whole country was on strike. And for about 8-9 months, there were shortages of food, lines for food, shortages of gasoline, power outages, water outages. It was very difficult. Tanks were in the streets. People were in the streets demonstrating. Bullets were flying. And there were demonstrations. People were chanting Istiqlal, Azadi, Jumhuri Islami, which translates to independence, freedom, and Islamic Republic. And they thought that if the country changed to an Islamic Republic, as Khomeini had promised, the utopia will come. Everything would be wonderful. Ayatollah Khomeini had promised free bus rides, free chicken, free water. People believed him. And suddenly the king became the center of all the corruption, and all the whatever was happening was because of the king. So this caused religious minorities, especially the Jews, to be alert, because an Islamic Republic suddenly marginalized non-Muslims. Nobody knew what Islamic Republic would entail. So they believed Khomeini, and they hoped for the better. But unfortunately, what happened was he immediately purged out all of his opponents, and the country took a different direction. The name of the country was changed to the Islamic Republic of Iran. The constitution was edited and changed. The emblem on the flag was changed from a lion and the sun to Allah, which means God in Arabic. And many new laws were introduced. Most importantly, the new regime was founded on 3 ideologies. First was animosity towards Western values, and America was known as the Great Satan, the cause of all evil. The second ideology of the regime was the destruction of Israel. Israel was known as the Little Satan, or the Zionist regime. And since the revolution, also any ties with Israel were severed, and any travel, communication, or relations with Israel is considered a crime. And third ideology is the hijab, and laws for women. So women who had achieved a lot of laws in their favor under the monarchy, all those laws were reversed. For example, the covering of the hijab, which is an Islamic dress code, is mandatory in Iran. It's not a choice. And currently, there are 2 countries in the world, Afghanistan and Iran, where hijab is mandatory. And a lot of laws that women had gained were taken away from them. Basically, in Iran today, a married woman is not allowed to travel or get a passport without her husband's written permission. Women, if they need to get a job, the husband needs to agree with that job. Usually, family laws are in favor of men, and so forth.
So what made you stay during the revolution? Like, for the amount of time you did stay? And then what ultimately made you decide that you wanted to leave?
Well, it wasn't my choice. A lot of, as I said, the community was leaving, my cousins, my siblings, anybody who could. Why I stayed was because I met my future husband at that time. He was studying. He was in the south of the country. There was a university, the city called Shiraz. He was a surgery resident, and he needed 2.5 more years to finish his education. Before the revolution, there was a reciprocity between the university and Pennsylvania, Penn State, and he thought he would finish his education and we could, if things did not go for the better, we could come to America. Little did we know that after the revolution, this reciprocity was cut off, and Iran was engaged in 1980. The country of Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded Iran, and an 8-year Iran-Iraq war pursued from 1980 to 1988. Once the war started, for a little short time, the borders were closed. And then during those years, it's not now, but during those years, early 80s, it was not a written law, but the Jewish families didn't have it easy. They wouldn't make it easy for them to leave, the ones who had stayed behind. For example, I could not get a passport. My husband had a passport, but they would not allow an intact family to leave. And although I was never political, I was not able to get a passport. So I couldn't leave. So we stayed. And I had 2 children there. I explained how finally we left, but it wasn't easy. We had to leave behind all our properties. We had a beautiful home. We had to lock the door. And I took the hands of my 2 children, then ages 6 and 2, and we left with 2 suitcases and never went back.
In your book, you write about the first time seeing your daughter in a hijab.
Correct.
That's what really ultimately made that decision for you. Can you explain what it felt like, what you went through seeing your daughter like that? Yes,
well, let me back up and say what hijab was. Iranian women before the revolution were dressed like Western women, very fashionable, very modern. And then after the revolution, they were forced to wear the Islamic dress code. So what did hijab at that time mean? The first decade of the revolution, the Islamic Republic where I lived, hijab was extremely strict. So what did that mean? For 8 years, I could only wear the colors of black, gray, navy, and brown. And only the roundness of a woman's face and hands up to the wrist could show. No nail polish, no makeup. And it took almost 2 years to enforce this law. Women resisted. Women have been resisting these laws against them since the beginning of the revolution. But how this was enforced was by a branch of police called the morality police. Morality police, they went around the city streets and neighborhoods, and they would reprimand and arrest women who were not complying with the new law. And it still continues. And still many women of the country, girls and women, oppose this because it should be a choice, and the level, it's beyond modesty. It involves a lot of rules and laws that subjugates women. And it should be a choice. Even some women in Iran, some of them who do observe hijab, oppose it for being mandatory on everyone. And it's compulsory for anyone. So it doesn't matter what religion you are, what ethnicities you are. Even if you travel to Iran, you have to wear it. And girls from the age of 6, when they enter first grade, have to wear the hijab. So my daughter was 6 years old. She started first grade. And she started wearing hijab. But it was more than that. She was indoctrinated into strict Islamist ideology. For example, every morning they had to stand in line and chant death to America, death to Israel. She didn't even know where these places were. There were many incidents and I could not even tell her anything else because they were like little spies for the family and they were children. That was very hard for us to see our daughter being brainwashed.
Ultimately, seeing your daughter like that made you want to leave Iran. Can you describe the process of getting out and you're relocating to America and how building a new life in America was like?
It was not easy to get out. As I mentioned, we had to leave everything behind. I left my parents behind, and for 14 years, until they managed to leave, I never saw them for 14 years. Coming to America, it was not an easy process to get to America. As I said, I never had a passport to leave Iran. But we got out. Coming to America was a whole different story because for reasons that I mentioned in the book, I was not allowed to study. Higher education was my goal, but I did not have that opportunity. Iran, when the revolution happened, for 3 years, they closed down all higher education. It was called Cultural Revolution to change all the curriculum and make it more Islamic, all higher education. So imagine a country that higher education is closed for 3 years. And that was the year I wanted to enter university. When it reopened, now there's a war going on with Iraq. So they gave 1/3 of the admissions were for the families of the martyrs of the revolution. 1/3 was for the wounded, families of the wounded of the revolution and the war. And 1/3 was for people like me. But then, no matter what you wanted to study at that time, I'm talking about the early 80s, you had to get a reference from the imam of the mosque, the clerics in the mosque, and you had to know what no matter what you wanted to study, I had to pass a theology exam in Shiite Islam. So that immediately made it impossible for me to go to a university in America, in Iran.
Are there still Jews in Iran?
Oh, there are. In Iran, the Jews and Christians are considered people of the book because they preceded Islam. And their religions are respected. Of course, being Zionist is illegal, but the problem is the line between Zionism and anti-Semitism blurs at times. Jews can practice their faith. They have synagogues, they have kosher butchery, kosher shops, restaurants, but it's a very small community now. The majority live in the capital city of Tehran, and there are some in Shiraz, majority. They are free to practice their religion, but of course they do not get involved with the government. They keep separate with Zionism, and they keep a low profile and live their lives.
During the revolution, was it dangerous to be like Jewish there? Like, were Jews being killed, or it was just you escaping to have a different
No,
life?
it was dangerous to be pro-Israel. Jews were not being killed. The Jews were not, and I have to give it, since the revolution, Jews haven't been singled out. A lot have been persecuted, Muslims or otherwise. But in May of 1979, there was a Jewish philanthropist and honorary leader of the Jewish community. His name was Habib El-Ghanian, very wealthy industrialist who had introduced plastics to Iran. My father had worked for him, and he traveled to Israel. He had built buildings in Israel, did business, which before the revolution many did. And he did a lot for Iran. He was arrested. Those days, at the beginning of the revolution, there were many executions. He was arrested on the charge of being a spy for Israel or have dealings with the Zionist regime. And executions were done very fast. Trials were fast. I think a day or two later, he was executed by a firing squad. And that gave the Iranian Jews, it was a catalyst for them to leave because it was very scary times. Immediately after El-Ghanian's execution, a committee, I think there were 7 A few rabbis and community leaders gathered and requested a meeting with Ayatollah Khomeini, who at the time was in Qom. Qom was a city in the south of Tehran, like the Vatican of the Shiite world, very holy city. And he granted that meeting. They met with Khomeini, and I saw it televised. And at that meeting, they wanted to tell the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, that the Jews of Iran were loyal to Iran. They were not Zionists, and they were pro-regime. They had to survive. And Khomeini gave a declaration which somehow I can say saved the Iranian Jews. He said that Judaism is separate to Zionism. Jews are people of the book, but they too hate Zionists, and Zionists, all Jews hate Zionists, and separated them. And this has been the policy of the Jews till today. Keep Zionism separate.
With all the civil unrest in the world today, and you going through, the Iranian civil unrest that went through, is there a message that you would like to share?
My experiences has told me we have more in common than we have differences. I have wonderful Muslim friends who are very close to me. I have friends of all faiths. It's the decency of the human being. And I feel a lot of, actually in the diaspora, there are almost 10% of Iran's population live in diaspora. They live in America or the West, Europe. And through these demonstrations, we have seen, especially in Los Angeles, a lot of Muslim Iranians are pro-Israel. So I feel we have more in common than differences. And a lot of Iranians who have experienced the Islamic Republic regime understand oppression, possibly. They've experienced it. So it should be a lesson of tolerance. I would like to mention that during the revolution, when it was absolute chaos, the Chabad sent two rabbis to Tehran in the summer of 1978, Rabbi Hecht and Rabbi Elulian. They came to Tehran, and I remember hearing that there were two rabbis who were helping children get out of this chaos. And eventually, 1,800 Iranian children, teenagers, they left Iran. They were given I-20 visas. They came to Crown Heights, and many families took them in. And this is a very positive, my own two cousins got out of Iran that way, some of my friends. And I was giving a talk at a few Chabads, and the rabbis told me that when they were children, they remember that their parents took some of these children in.
What motivated you after coming to America to write your book, From Miniskirt to Hijab?
My father became sick. He passed away in 2014. And I realized that with his passing, my children had really no recollection of Iran, what happened, or they were very young. And I was that chain. If I didn't write it, nobody would know what had happened. And what happened was, I had a friend at a community college, and she taught she had a Jewish studies class. And she said, I have a very small class. Would you please come and talk to them? I have maybe 8 students. I said, sure. She said, come and tell your story. This was May 2014. So she said, I'm going to put some leaflets around the college just in case the public wants to come. So I remember it was in May. It was a rainy day. I go there, over 150 people had come to hear my story. I never even had a book. And I said it, and everybody said, you need to write a book. This is so interesting. And then I started writing. It took a few years, but the words poured out.
With the rise of anti-Semitism around the world today, can you share some importance of being proudly Jewish in the face of all of that?
Well, I wrote the book. My father had grew up in his childhood. He grew up in the city of Isfahan. At that time, the Jews were mainly lived in their own neighborhoods. And through his own upbringing or his parents' upbringing, he would tell me, be quiet, keep a low profile, don't flaunt your Jewishness. May not be safe. Be cautious. But then when I wanted to write the book, I said, well, I'm proud. This is who I am. This is where I was born. And I have a story. I'm not going to stay quiet because I'm Jewish or whatever. This is my story. And I'm very proud of what I wrote and who I am.
The Rohr Jewish Learning Institute has the largest collection of Jewish media online. Hit subscribe for more.